Hey, hello everybody. Finally, we managed to get here. We were experiencing a little bit of a technical difficulty earlier on. So, unfortunately, the stream that I had scheduled with the link that I had sent before did not work. But hey, this is what happens when you're doing things live. On occasion, you press the wrong button and something goes offline. But never mind, here we are, and we are here to talk about online exams. And if some of you have clicked on the previous link and it gave you to an ended event, then hopefully you will be able to see that this has now started on a new video. So apologies for this, but hey, this is, as I said, the beauty of doing things live. Right, not to delay you guys, the purpose that we're here today is to talk about online exams. Now, online exams are something that has happened to all of us in recent years, especially after the pandemic. Online exams have become the standard. Now, what used to happen before that is that your standard undergraduate student would go through their year at uni properly, and when they got to the end at about May time, they would need to sit one of those 3-hour nasty exams where you would have pen and paper and they would sit you down in some sort of amphitheater or in the sports hall. Anybody who's my age and has studied at the campus university has probably experienced this unpleasantness of being in a basketball court where they would put all these small tables all over the place in these tiny rickety little chairs that people would have to sit on, and then they would distribute preset pieces of paper. At some point, somebody would ring a bell and say, it's time for you to go. And you would start your 3-hour marathon of handwriting these exams. Now, for better or worse, all these things have disappeared. And we are now dealing with online exams only. Now, there are a few benefits to the online exams. There are some definite advantages there. First of all, you can do the majority of them from home. So you don't have to incur the transport costs. You don't have to have the stress of kind of getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning to drag yourself to a British Council location or something like this. Even if you were studying at your local institution somewhere close by, still you don't have the hassle of trying to get there. So you can do them from the comfort of your home. Additionally, the cost of the online exam is lower. It's lower for the student subscribing for the exam, but it's also for the institution holding it, which means that if you are paying this exam piece by piece, for example, our students who are from the University of London, they need to book in and pay for specific exams. If this is the sort of program that you're on, you will find that the cost of doing it online is lower than the cost that you would have if you were doing it in a physical location someplace. Of course, at the same time, there are some disadvantages. One of the key disadvantages is the possibility that you guys might be cheating. Now, I'm not accusing anybody directly of having any evil intentions, but there is this perception that online exams or remote exams, non-directly invigilated exams, are more prone to instances of cheating. Now, at the same time, you might consider this as an advantage if you were the ones thinking that, is there any way I can game this? But we want to ensure the veracity of this exam and the value of this exam, both for the majority of our students and also for the people externally. So potential employers, anybody who's looking at your CV, we want them to get the impression that you have been assessed properly at the appropriate level and that the exam was safe and that nobody was cheating and all of that stuff. Now, if you were sitting one of these old-fashioned go to the lecture theater and sit down or go to a sports hall and sit in front of a piece of paper, you would have people circling the room. So you would be sitting down there trying to write, and there would be somebody kind of hovering above you, or if you had a statute book with you, they would pick up the statute book and kind of leaf through it and see what is going on. By the way, I can see we have a couple of people on the live stream right now. So thank you guys for joining in. And again, apologies for having provided a new link halfway through. So if you would like to introduce yourselves to the chat there, You can say hi to each other and everybody else. So this is the little chat function that you've got on the right hand side of your screen, hopefully. And if you're enjoying this and everything works well, give us a thumbs up as well. For me, to regain my confidence as I was experiencing this kind of technological meltdown, maybe I should listen to my YouTuber friends and kind of get a StreamYard subscription and run it through StreamYard, even though Google has done its best YouTube has done its best in keeping this up while I was kind of fiddling with my internet connection. All right, so I'm talking about online exams. And I was talking about the possibility that a lot of people might perceive the online exam to be subject to manipulation. So I was saying, therefore, that it's possible that if you're in a physical room, you've got invigilators going up and down, checking your things, checking your statute book. This will not happen in the same fashion if you're having an online exam. The exams that we have at the University of London, for those of you that are on the external program of the University of London, either at the undergraduates for the LLB or the postgraduates for the LLM, we have now introduced a proctoring system. Now, this sounds painful, and it is for us, to be honest, but what it actually means is that you have some surveillance software installed of your computer that is keeping an eye while you're preparing for it and while you actually launch and you're taking this exam. What the proctoring software, this specific model, but also others that are used for these purposes, they take a recording of you, a video recording, they take an audio recording. They also lock down the capabilities of your computer, so you can only access things that your examination allows you to access. So most of the time, because you sit in closed book exams, you will not have access to the internet. You will not be able to open another browser, open another window, or open other software. And the idea is, since the computer is doing the job of invigilating and is keeping an eye on you, you cannot really be looking to the side to see if you've got other resources. You cannot call your friends. You cannot have your mom next to you. And you cannot kind of have a second computer when you're asking ChatGPT what the answer might be. Now, this is going to be the experience of those of you, as I said, in the University of London that are gearing up to take exams this autumn with this invigilated system. Whether this is going to work effectively on your personal computer, this is a concern that a lot of students have. Every time we're using software on untested devices, we always have a little bit of a concern. But when the software installs on your computer, it does a check to make sure that everything is up to spec and can work effectively. So don't stress too much if you've got like a dodgy internet connection or an old computer. The software is designed to check all this and verify what's going on. In addition, for the University of London system, you don't have to be online all the time. So it needs to be online at the beginning when it loads up and allows you to start the exam, and then you can be offline, and then you go online again to upload your essay when you're done. So if you have spotty internet connections, or if you're relying on running a hotspot from your mobile, then don't worry about this. Temporary loss of an internet connection is not going to be the end of the world. Now, getting to the meaty parts, how does one go about preparing for an online exam? Now, I probably should mention here that there are other types of electronically assisted exams. For instance, we might have in the room today, or we might in the replay, you might see this. If you're preparing for the SQE, which is the solicitors qualifying examination, you will not be doing the exam at home, but you will be doing the exam in an examination center, but with a computer. So what happens for the first part of the SQE, which is this specific exam, is that you are in a controlled space with human invigilators, but the exam is a multiple choice test. So this combines, in a way, the capabilities or the experiences of a physical exam and the experiences of an online exam. You will be in a physical venue that you have to get there, but everything is going to be happening on a computer that is locked specifically for the purposes of that multiple choice test. So there are variants, therefore, and variations in what an online exam can be and how it or a computer assisted exam is and how it materializes. Now, when we're getting to the preparation part, how do you prepare for such an exam? Well, you prepare for this exam in the same way that you prepare for any exam. I'm concerned sometimes that some students get the impression that if the exam is somehow computerized, it's going to be easier. Now, unfortunately, the means through which we're taking the exam has no reflection on how much you need to prepare in order to meet the learning outcomes of this exam effectively. If anything, if you're used to handwriting, then you might find that using computers to carry out this exam makes things more difficult. Now, the majority of people are perfectly capable of typing and are typing at kind of relatively decent speeds. So it doesn't really phase people that much anymore to use a computer in order to produce an answer to an exam. However, there are some students that are used to handwrite, especially from jurisdictions where sit-down physical exams are the norm that need to be handwritten. It is perfectly possible that the idea of taking your exam through electronic means puts you off. Now, specifically for the University of London, you are not allowed to submit a handwritten copy of your exam unless you have prior permission from the university. Now, the details of this are going to be explained to you in your examinations notice and by specific information that the university is going to give people. But please do not make the assumption that you will be allowed to kind of take your own piece of paper and handwrite your answer and then take a picture and upload it. This causes a little bit of a confusion because in the past, when we had the non-invigilated remote exam, we did allow people to have a handwritten copy that then they would take a picture of and upload as their answer, and that was fine. But since we introduced Inspera, which is the proctoring software, we don't allow people on demand to produce handwritten copy. Being mindful of this, it's probably a good idea to work on your typing skills. If you are the sort of person that has sat a majority of handwritten exams and you're perfectly capable with your handwriting, you should really make a concentrated effort to get yourself used to typing accurately, and typing at speed. Now, for me, my handwriting's terrible. But maybe the reason why it's terrible is because I never handwrite anything. I mean, the only thing I handwrite is, the occasional short note, or if I write a postcard to somebody or something like this. So I'm really not confident in my handwriting. Plus, I've been used to the spell checker function for so long that my spelling is atrocious to the point that, people don't understand what it is that I'm writing. So it can work both ways. We've got students who are perfectly capable handwriting and they're afraid of having to type for long periods of time. And we've got people who are used to only type stuff with the assistance of spell checkers, and then they're unable to write like a sentence handwritten. So I definitely belong in the second category right there. So I apologize if I ever send you a handwritten note. You probably figured that I have a problem in that area. Now, to come back to the point of preparation and how do you best prepare for an exam like this, do not prepare for the exam in isolation of the substantive content of the module or the course that you're studying. The way in which you can prepare and the way in which you should prepare is a reflection of the course that you're sitting. So, of course, different skills and competencies are tested at different levels depending on what you're doing. It's possible that we have in this room some of my students from the Open University. At the Open University, all the submission of assessment is remote, but we don't have, at least in the modules that I'm on for the master's program, we don't have timed assessments. So again, it's a type of online exam what the students are having to go through, but the skills that they need to demonstrate by putting together a longer piece of work over a longer period of time are very different from somebody who's called upon to answer a set of multiple choice questions, as you have for the SQE, or somebody that is called upon to have a 2 hour or a 1 hour timed exam as the ones that we're doing for the University of London. So knowing exactly how you're going to be assessed, but also being very well familiar with the learning outcomes that you're meant to demonstrate through this assessment in order to ensure success is necessary. So not all exams come in different shapes and sizes. They come with different purposes, and you need to be uniquely focused on the learning outcomes that have been set for you in order to ensure that you succeed. Now, there are some people always that complain that this takes, I mean, I wouldn't say fun, because nobody associates the word fun with an exam, right? Exams are never fun. But in a way, being very formulaic takes a little bit of the enjoyment and the intellectual engagement of producing something. Now, I will agree with this, that sometimes doing an exam in a very stylistic way that is designed to correspond immediately to the learning outcomes leaves ingenuity and personal expression and a little bit of individuality out of the system. But think about what your purpose is. If your purpose is to succeed and get the best marks possible in this exam, then you unfortunately have to get used to the idea that you need to produce things within these particular frames. I had a friend of mine at uni when I was an undergraduate at the University of Essex that he kept complaining that what I was producing was very boring, that I was approaching all my assessments in a very formulaic way, so putting together a puzzle always by picking up the substantive information, looking at the question on the basis of the learning outcomes, and just kind of clipping things together as if I was making a Lego set, instead of being a little bit more creative and expressing myself better. He approached it in a different way. He tried to put his ideas first and what he thought and how he perceived the subject and how it affected him. Now, the problem with this is his essays were a lot more interesting and a lot more individual and probably a lot better and nicer to read for the examiners, but his marks were lower than mine. Because even though his essays were better as a piece of writing, we were not taking a creative writing class. We were not a literature school. We were doing this in the context of a law school. So the teachers didn't really have the freedom to reward what he was putting together in the terms that he was working on it. They had to mark against a marking frame that was solely focused on the learning outcomes that we had been set. Therefore, my fairly formulaic kind of Lego style approach to the questions was producing better marks than his more kind of open liberal approach. So keep this in mind every time you're preparing for the exam. You need to really anticipate what it is that you're trying to achieve, and unfortunately, you need to restrict yourselves within that time frame. It does get worse, because if you are one of the students who have to sit the solicitors qualification exam, then the first part of it, which is a huge chunk of this exam, are multiple choice questions. Therefore, the idea of you taking a sort of innovative or more liberal view to addressing your exam is completely out the window. You just have to tick boxes, right? So again, if you know what the style of the exam is, then that can help you preparing effectively. Now, if we take a step back, because I wanted to focus this session, I've advertised this session to students who are taking the Open University classes, people who are at Westminster with me during the day, people who are at the University of London, also students who are attempting the SQE. So this was, I thought, a session that might be useful for everybody. Of course, it wasn't that useful when you had to wait 5 minutes for me to log on, but that's besides the point. I would like to focus for a moment here on our University of London students who are going to be sitting their exams soon from October onwards. Now, these students have to sit a 1 hour timed exam through this online proctoring software. Now, one of the questions that I frequently get is, what can be achieved in an hour? How much could you possibly write in 1 hour? We used to get different volumes of material when students were attempting this exam in handwritten copy. Because as I said before the pandemic, these students had to go and sit in the British Council because this is remote. It's distance learning. So people would register for this exam at the place where they live all around the world. So they would book a place for the exam. They would turn up, usually at the British Council location. They would get pen and paper and produce these answers. Then, from an environmental sustainability aspect, this is absolutely horrible. These papers used to be collected at the examination center and then sent from all over the world. Can you imagine this? Sent all the way back to Senate House at the University of London in Russell Square, in the center of London here. And then they would send them, they would put them all together depending on what the subject was, and then they would courier them to the examiners. So they would come to me in like a massive pack, and after I was done marking them, I would need to courier them to the second examiner. So they would come from all over the world to Senate House, then come out to all of us. We would send it to the second examiner, and the second examiner would send them back to Senate House, where they got sent someplace else to be warehoused. It's just kind of mind-blowing logistics, which are just dreadful from an environmental point of view. So if you kind of look out the window and you see what the weather's like and you're thinking, wow, we have destroyed this planet, maybe online exams can be a way where the university can make a contribution and reduce a little bit of that waste. But hey, what you're left with is the 1 hour online exam. So comes back to the question, how much can you write? The students who used to do this in hard copy, they would produce 4, 5, 6 sometimes handwritten pages. But of course, handwriting from one person and handwriting from another person are two very, very different things. So, some people write in tiny script, some people write in like huge letters and leave a lot of space in between. So it became impossible to give an indication as to how much we wanted in terms of volume, because people's personal styles vary so much. With the online exam, it's becoming a little bit better to estimate. What I tend to get these days in terms of good answers, they tend to be 3 pages of typed script on a sort of standard font. I mean, we use Times New Roman size 12 or Arial size 11. You know what I mean here. 3 pages of that are about 1,000 words. Now, you're probably thinking now, what does that? Can I actually write 1,000 words in an hour? Well, you do have less than an hour, because when an exam is set at an hour, you got 10 minutes of reading time at the beginning and 5 minutes to upload your answer at the end. So you lose, if you want to call it that, about 15 minutes in prep time, thinking about this, figuring out the question, and then dealing with the logistics of downloads and uploads. You got 45 minutes clean writing time. And that might include a little, taking a step back to think about your structure a little bit and to verify that you're talking about the things that you need to talk about and things are going correctly. So 45 minutes typing time, and usually we don't type like crazy. It takes us a little bit of time to kind of get into the juice of it. 45 minutes of typing will probably land you in the area of 1,000 words. I've struggled, honestly, to kind of estimate this, and I made a video about this that I'm going to link down in the description below, so you can go watch that video specifically with reference to this kind of 1 hour exam. But I think 1,000 words is an achievable objective, which will translate into about 3 pages of typed text. Usually we leave a bit of space between the lines and so on. Which would roughly be 5 or 6 pages of handwritten text, as I said, if you were handwriting. Now, you might be thinking now, is this actually enough? Well, how do you define enough? The way we define enough is, has this person met the learning outcomes that we set for this assignment within the time that we gave them? Because we are very mindful about the amount of time it takes to produce these things. it would not be realistic if we give you 45 minutes of typing time, but we actually expect 10 pages in order to reward you with a distinction level mark. This would be unfair on you, and it is not achievable. So our understanding of what a good answer is informed very much by the time that you have to do it. Which brings us back to my earlier point, which was, how do you prepare for this exam effectively, or for any exam effectively, especially these online ones? The way to do it is to anticipate the nature of the exam, the demands of the exam, and be knowledgeable of the substantive content. You cannot do any of these things in isolation. This is a little bit of a puzzle. So, knowing the substantive content is necessary. But if you don't know what the exam is like and how you meant to produce it and go from one to the other, you won't be able to make that journey. Equally, if you know the technical aspects, but your knowledge of the substantive content is weak, again, you will have difficulty making that journey. So you need to appreciate the nature of the exam, what it's asking, how it's taking place, and then do your study to get on top of the material. Whether the exam offers you options or not and gives you choices is also crucially important. This is why our friends who are taking the SQE, the Solicitors Qualifying Examination, are at a serious disadvantage, because the SQE is a large multiple choice test and you cannot skip any questions. You have to answer all the questions in order to get the best possible mark. Any question you miss is marks missed. This, of course, changes a lot the way in which you need to revise, because you don't have the option of leaving something out. You need to have a good command of the totality of the knowledge content, which makes everything a lot more challenging. In an exam where you do have a choice, for instance, in the exams that, now for my undergraduate modules, I've shifted to multiple choice tests as well to reflect the way in which the profession is moving. But for other types of classes where we have an online exam of specific duration, we tend to give students options. If you have options, like a traditional exam paper in business law used to be an exam paper with 9 questions, out of which you needed to answer 6. So, of course, you could pick and choose to a degree the topics. If you have some choice of a topic, then you have some choice over the parts of the module or the course that you specialize in. Some things you're better at naturally because they're easier for you because you understand them better. Some stuff you have put some more effort on, so you can make those choices. And it's always a bit of a gamble, right? Because it could be that you focused and super revised certain things that have not come up with the exam, but at least you had the opportunity to make some of those selections. The exams at the University of London offer you a choice of 2 questions. So the exam that I was discussing before that lasts for 1 hour, it will have question A and question 1 and question 2, and you get to choose which one you attempt. So that again gives you some opportunity. It is limited, but it gives you some opportunity to make some selections on your revision. Now, my top tip for preparation for your exam would be to attain a base level of competence over the totality of the learning content, and then specialize in certain areas, anticipating what's going to come in the exam. How can you anticipate what's going to come? By looking at past exam papers. In traditional academic settings, including at the University of London, we publish past exam papers. Not only we publish them, but we also give you examiners' reports on them, which contain most of the time sample answers on what a good answer would be to this particular question. If you have this capability for the type of thing that you're studying, you have to go through the past papers for a few years running, and then you begin to detect patterns. Remember that we are examining you on a relatively tight learning content, right? We don't examine, the module is not endless, the syllabus doesn't go everywhere. So we have to examine you within a particular syllabus We have to examine you against a set of pre-released learning outcomes, and we need to come up with questions on these things every year, sometimes twice a year, which makes it a little bit tricky for us to come up with really original questions every time we're preparing for an exam. What does this mean for you? It actually makes things easier for you, because if you have access to past exam papers and you go back through them for a while, then you will be able to anticipate and guess what are the sort of things that come up in these exams and the way in which they come up. So, how does one best prepare for an exam in a traditional academic setting? By, as we said, checking what the knowledge content is, checking what the style of the exam is, but also working into their preparation and into their selections of topics what has happened in the past, by having a careful view of the past exam papers and all of these things. So that, I hope, right, for the places that I'm examiner and I'm setting the questions, I hope it makes things nice, predictable, and achievable for everybody. And remember, we are not nasty. Your success is our success. So we want everybody to do as best as they can to the best of their ability. We're not looking to trip anybody up. We're not putting kind of weird questions. We're not kind of sticking questions about things that are in the footnotes that nobody has ever mentioned. We try to test you on your knowledge of the core things. And we are fully aware that you only have a very limited amount of time to demonstrate your competence over these issues. Now, if on the other hand, you are sitting an exam in a professional as opposed to an academic setting, for example, our friends who are candidates for the SQE, there you've got no choice and you've got no past papers. Isn't that funny? I think this is hugely unfair, to be honest, and I think I'm entitled to say this because I don't work for the regulator, I don't work for the person who set up the exam. I'm just in the same boat that my candidates are. We're all trying to figure out what's going on. The fact that they do not publish past papers for this exam, I think makes things hugely difficult for everybody. And it has left everybody in a position that they're struggling to find models. And I told you already that the first part of the exam, SQE1, is a big multiple choice test. So everybody's trying to find multiple choice questions. When you get to the second part of the exam, SQE2, it actually has a lot of practical elements to it. Since they don't publish you the information, it's extremely difficult to anticipate what's going on. That's why I've struggled with the idea, how does one prepare for this exam unless they pay for tuition from somebody? And I've got a couple of videos, one of them specifically addressed to people who are attempting to prepare independently for this exam. I'm going to give you a link down in the description. The conclusion was that it is going to be very tricky. And if you have no access to past exam papers, you have a limited amount of information on the exam itself, and you do not wish to pay for tuition in order to get some sort of inner knowledge in the hope that the people who are telling you this stuff know themselves what they're talking about, right? Then you're having a difficult task. Now, what I'm trying to do, if you're a part of this category, if you're a candidate for the SQE, especially SQE1, and you're trying to prepare, I've got a Facebook group in which I'm sharing information that you might find helpful. Again, I'm going to put the link down in the description. But I've also recently launched a newsletter that I'm sending people multiple choice questions. So once a week, I'm sending out this newsletter that contains a multiple choice question for you to test yourselves on. And then it's got some recommended reading that is accessible to everybody, some recommendations, some tips, and it's got an answer to the question from the previous week. So you get the question, you've got a week to work on it and think about it, then you see the answer in the newsletter that's going to come the week after. And that hopefully helps you with your confidence in attempting these questions. Because I'm creating those questions on the style of the SQE, they are closer to what you're going to find in the actual exam, I hope, as opposed to multiple choice questions that you might see attached to a textbook or something like this. So hopefully this helps people. So if you're preparing for the SQE and you want to participate in this, subscribe to my newsletter so then we can have the opportunity to have these discussions together once a week. I think I've gone on for quite a long while now. I've got some people joining in the live, and I'm so grateful for you guys. And thank you for following me around as I was struggling with the IT. So it was lovely to see you all here. I will schedule another live stream soon on more specific topics. I hope you feel a bit more confident about the online exams that you've got coming on. And, such is life. We all have to go through exams sooner or later. So hopefully this is providing some comfort, and or at least, you get the feeling that there are more people involved in this. Hopefully I'll see you around. If you enjoyed this, hit the like button, put a comment down in the chat to let me know how is going on for you, and hopefully I'll meet with you guys either through the newsletter or on the Facebook group. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining me today, and I'll see you again soon.